But the thing that's remarkable about cannabis is that you're dissociating into the realization that we're all in this together. We're all fingers on one hand. We're in a community. It isn't like just I think the vibrational energy of the plant is different than if you're using alcohol or using other products to dissociate, because the cannabis really brings you into a community, brings you into a sense that you have support and a shared community rather than isolating you further, like I think oftentimes alcohol can do.
You're listening to Guards Down. This is Greg Washington.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Guards Down. I have with me today a very special person, Dr. Mary Clifton. How are you?
Great. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me, Greg.
Good. Well, of course, today we're going to hit on a very special topic and near and dear to my heart. We want to talk about cannabis when dealing with PTSD and complicated grief. And so I just kind of, want to allow you a chance to, introduce yourself and your background, and let's talk about your niche.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've been working in the CBD and cannabis industry for about 5 years now, after I had a couple of people going through hospice experiences, going through end-of-life experiences and having amazing results, that I started to look into it and realized that there was a lot of work that needed to be done in this industry. So I've been shooting videos, introductory educational videos on how to use CBD and cannabis in various disease states. I have about 100 videos now and just launched a provider certification course to create a coaching community. So I've been having a really great time pulling all of that together and making it available and meeting all the key players in the industry like yourself.
Oh, wow. And I appreciate that. Yeah, that sounds like a big task that you're taking on there. What got you into this arena?
Well, I had my brother die about 5 years ago from colon cancer, and I was at his bedside for that, which is a little unusual. I always have, and in a general internal medicine practice, we take care of old people. So it's unusual to not have somebody in the dying process in my practice over the 25 years that I've been practicing. You're always working with somebody through that process. So that's not unusual. But the unusual part was really being at the bedside and giving the medications myself, because typically a hospice nurse or a family member, somebody else is doing that part of the job. But because it was my brother, it was my job. And that I didn't have great control with the current medications that I had. I mean, I was doing everything right according to all of the, hospice protocols, but we didn't have great control of his anxiety. We didn't have good pain control. It was just a difficult process to watch, especially because it was somebody that I loved. And then that was a tough thing to go through. Then, 4 months later, I worked with a girlfriend who was also going through the same thing. And because of our relationship, I was at the bedside again. And in that circumstance, she was treating with cannabis as her primary way to manage her condition, and just was getting remarkable results. So 2 different people, 2 different types of cancer, but still the results were so different. So I went back and tried to do some research and figured that I would start researching, and I would find that we don't have any data, that the data is no quality, that, and I'll just get back to being an internist. But there's a lot of great data. And so I've worked for many years in vegan dieting and in helping people sort of take back their health by diet and lifestyle changes. And I, am still in that, but I've pivoted largely to CBD and cannabis because they're very powerful products, really valuable for, especially in the PTSD and anxiety treatment realms. And we need to get to the bottom of exactly what they can do for us and then utilize them in these communities. I mean, in anxiety and in PTSD, you've got, I think, two major ways that cannabinoid formulations can help. They can help with managing anxiety symptoms, just the day-to-day hypervigilance, the intrusive thoughts, difficulty falling asleep, a lot of those feelings that anxiety people suffer with. But then there's also good research to show that using cannabinoids before therapy is a really good way to open the brain and have the brain be more responsive to therapy. So there's a position for day-to-day use of cannabinoids for symptom control, but there's also a position to help make that therapy be more successful and help people to heal faster from PTSD, which is really exciting.
Man, that is exciting. I can definitely relate. And I remember, we were talking about this earlier, where being a veteran, because I was medically discharged from the military. And so, I've dealt with nerve damage and migraine headaches and PTSD and insomnia. And I remember just having a whole bunch of different types of medications to take. And you take one medication and it had side effects, so you had to take another pill to counter those side effects, and it would just leave you bland. And so, moving into looking at holistic or, alternative to medicines really helped open up my eyes into the community of cannabis and how powerful it can be in treatment. And so can you tell us more about your treatment plans that you do for patients?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think probably, there's so much research on different things that do the trick within cannabis and CBD. I mean, one of my favorite research studies is done on it's a small study. And that's one of the problems that we have with cannabis is that a lot of the studies are small and we have to rely on elegantly designed small studies rather than thousands of people that we can look at and see how things are trending. So we really don't necessarily have great data around particular cultivars or particular strains and how they manage. We don't, have thousands of people who have tried a certain product. So a lot of the research is really people who have used cannabis or CBD and got a result, and we don't really even have it down to smoking it or edibles or vaping it or a tincture. So in a lot of cases, you're drawing conclusions that this is valuable, but we really don't have it, pared down to the exact properties of the exact product that's the most valuable. There's some dosage data coming in from some dosing companies that are using tools where you input the product that you're using and then you tell how well that product worked for you. And the apps allow you to monitor how it's working for you, but it also gives the company a lot of data on what particular cultivars are working in different ways. So we're learning some market-based data from those types of products, but not necessarily it's not necessarily the same as a randomized placebo-controlled trial, like these others. But my favorite trial looking at anxiety is a trial of college kids that were having generalized anxiety disorder and having so much trouble with it that they couldn't go to class. Not only couldn't go to class, but also couldn't go and do all of the social things that kids need to do, to have a really great time in college. And they took these young men, a group of young men, and divided them into two groups, treated one group with a significant amount of CBD, and the other group left them alone, and then gave them a IV and an MRI. Which are very anxiety provoking things to get. But it also allowed us to not only see how the CBD worked with the anxiety, but also to get some data on how their brain looked either being treated with CBD in an anxiety situation or not. And, because it was a functional MRI, so you could see how the brain was lighting up. And the CBD, turned out to be very valuable for helping the brain to respond to the anxiety in a really effective way. So that's a great study. And the other thing I loved about that study was that the young men were crossed over. So they took the group that was treated originally and the group that was untreated and brought them back for a second round, and then treated the second group and left the first group untreated. And then they were able to show the same results. So the CBD definitely helped the young men process the trauma better and also helped them manage their anxiety around the experience better.
Okay.
And so in a lot of cases, I find CBD to be really helpful in circumstances like that.
Indeed. And so when dealing with anxiety and depression, what should a person look for when they want to go out and try CBD or cannabis?
When you're dealing with anxiety, I'm sorry, what was your question? When you're dealing with anxiety and depression, what would you want to try? What would you like to use?
Yeah. Tell us what should we look for?
Oh, what should we look for? I mean, I think that in a lot of cases, CBD does a great job all by itself, and it's available in all 50 states. It's legal and easy to use. The only time that people get into trouble with using it is if they offer it to somebody under the age of 21. That's where you see people having problems with illegal consumption. So it's not a product to give to your children, not a product to use when you're pregnant or breastfeeding, and that position probably will not change. Well, the most recent research is pretty clear that we can't use it in those circumstances. But otherwise, if you're dealing with anxiety, then the question is, are you dealing with a lot of symptoms that require, treatment all day long, hour by hour, or is it something that comes up and you need to handle it when it comes up? Or is it, something that you just want to try to get through therapy? So you would administer CBD at whatever time makes the most sense to manage the symptoms that you're dealing with. So that's where it helps to talk to a coach or to talk to somebody who can really go through your symptoms and think about the best approach, the time when you would want to administer the CBD and also how quickly you need it to take place. Because if you really have great control of your symptoms, except for every now and then things get really wackadoodle, and then you want something that's going to get it under control right now, that's a different mode of administration than somebody who feels good, who feels anxious most of the time and needs something always in their system so that they feel better.
Yeah. Okay. So you bring up a very great point of having an onset of symptoms and then using, CBD as a reactive measure to counter that, right? What are some proactive things a person can do to kind of even avoid that trigger of getting anxiety or depression, before they get there?
Oh, like to try to reduce the onset of panic attacks. I don't necessarily get the impression that a lot of my patients with anxiety attacks have a way to recognize that they're coming. I think in a lot of cases, part of the panic and part of the fear around panic attacks is that they're just very difficult to recognize that they're on the way. But I mean, all of the things, the good news is all of the things that support a healthy endocannabinoid system also support a healthy microbiome. They protect you from cancer and heart disease and diabetes. So if you want to be healthy and strong from the point of view of any of those points, you want to eat a great diet with a lot of whole foods and high vegetable content, high fiber. You want to get your exercise. Both of those things are very stimulating to the endocannabinoid system. And then getting all the terpenes that are really nourishing for you, like pinene from basil, limonene from lemons, and getting the precursors for great neurotransmitters from nuts I did a talk like this once in front of my daughter, who's 20, who could really care less about medicine. She's this brilliant business mind, and I think all the stuff I say about medicine just sort of rolls off of her brain. It doesn't absorb at all. She's just totally disinterested in medicine, but she's a great little business person. But she said to me at the end of this particular interview, "So you want me to make a pesto to support my?" And yeah, I guess I want you to do that. Some lemon and some basil and the pine nuts and a healthy oil. Really brilliant way to help your body stay very healthy and nourished. And the same is going to be true of diet, exercise, sleep, relationships. All of those things support a healthy endocannabinoid system. But I also think, especially with the amount of stress that everybody's under right now, and how hard we all push on ourselves usually, and now we're all in the middle of a global crisis and a shared trauma that we're all experiencing. I think it's a very important time to make sure that your endocannabinoid system is properly supported. So I would also recommend a CBD product every day, whether you think you need it or not, just as part of your adaptogens and your vitamins, all the things that you take to provide your body with the support that you need to, to get through the crisis that you're in.
Yeah, no, that is excellent. And I liked how your daughter said, she kind of summed up the ingredients instead of pesto, I think.
It is funny. She's a great little cook, and we both love to cook, but I think her cooking skills may have already superseded mine, which is fun when you raise kids, that the kids end up doing something better than you did it. But that one's a better skier than me and a better cook than me. So I mean,
there we go.
It's great.
Job, right?
Yeah, you do feel like you did your job at least.
Indeed. Okay, so getting back to dealing with these triggers. So depression and panic attacks is one thing. What about dealing with aggression and anger issues from PTSD? Can CBD or cannabis affect that?
Oh, I think absolutely. Dealing with the anger and the and rage and the those types of emotions around the PTSD can sometimes be really disruptive. And a lot of times just having a product that gives you a second to sort of chill out and be able to examine, where the anger is coming from and work on it is really helpful. I think like an indica strain cannabis product, is although I think a lot of people also like the sativas for dissociation, just being able to dissociate a bit is really helpful. I think that's where cannabis shines, where CBD might not, because, with cannabis, you're experiencing some changes to your perceptions. I think it allows you to process your perceptions a little bit differently. And I think, you can do this with a number of drugs, right? There's all kinds of drugs available that will help you to feel differently than you usually feel. And then you can dissociate from what's happening to you right now and move into a different experience. But the thing that's remarkable about cannabis is that you're dissociating into the realization that we're all in this together. We're all fingers on one hand. We're in a community. It isn't like just I think the vibrational energy of the plant is different than if you're using alcohol or using other products to dissociate, because the cannabis really brings you into a community, brings you into a sense that you have support and a shared community, rather than isolating you further, like I think oftentimes alcohol can do.
Yeah. Okay. So I liked how you said earlier, you can make it a part of your everyday routine of using, CBD or just CBD. Are there any issues with mixing it with, vitamins or certain things?
No, I just actually wrote a blog post about this, about people who shouldn't take CBD. But, a lot of the concerns around people with liver disorders is really old data. That's mostly rat model data where they just gorged rats on cannabinoids and then, got a negative outcome and reported it. So it's pretty unusual for people to have any liver problems, although it does happen. It can happen every now and then that people have an allergic reaction or they have a liver problem or something like that. But there doesn't appear to be a lot of problems with other products, getting slowed down in their processing. Cannabinoids are processed through the cytochrome P450 system in the liver, which is a very commonly used system for a lot of drugs, but it doesn't slow down the processing of other drugs. It appears to go through the same pathways, but it doesn't appear to significantly slow other drugs, sort of differently than grapefruit, where grapefruit will get into these areas, but will actually slow processing of other drugs. Cannabis just is there, but everything is still moving along at a good pace. Because we thought before that maybe the way that people were reducing their opioids for pain management when they got on cannabis was because cannabis was slowing down the opioid breakdown, because that's actually on the same pathway in the liver. Mm-hmm. So we thought that maybe it would be a situation where if you took 10 milligrams of an opioid and also used cannabis, it would be like taking 20 milligrams of an opioid, because the opioid would last longer and it wouldn't break down. But that doesn't appear to be true. It appears that the cannabis has its own mechanism for managing pain, and that oftentimes, you're not seeing a decreased breakdown of the opioid. You're just seeing, the cannabis doing its particular effect on pain management.
Got you. Okay. Now that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you brought up the whole opioid because, there have been a lot of studies that, we have an opioid epidemic. And so being able to use cannabis as an alternative means, I'm personally all for it.
Oh, yeah, I am too. I love the idea of using cannabis to manage opioid concerns so that you can, get these symptoms under better control and not have something that is going to be so dangerous to take, something that's not only going to be dangerous to the individual taking it, side effects of constipation and sedation, but also the risk of that, of diversion, where if the opioids get onto a secondary market, then people can have problems with addiction and, misuse at so many levels. Mm-hmm. So having a better solution than opioids for pain is such a critical thing for us to do right now. Yeah. And we've got it, with cannabinoids. So it's something definitely worth trying. The trick is if you're already opioid dependent and you're seeing a pain doctor, a lot of times they don't want you to use cannabis because, they don't want to, they feel like it clouds the whole picture. So there are a few people who understand pain really well who will see you for, who will have you on opioids and will also work with you on your cannabis. Those are really good people to find and work with. That would actually be a fun clinic to open. I think if I ever get, into a brick and mortar again, I haven't been in a brick and mortar practice for 4 or 5 years. But when I think about doing that again, then I think about, opening one up to help people get off of whatever product they're on and onto natural stuff. But heck, you can do a lot of that over the phone now. Everything's telemedical. So. Yeah. But in order to help people stay on their opioids, you would need to have a clinic like that where you could write the opioids,
Understood. So are there any risk of addiction when it comes to cannabis and CBD?
Oh, that's such a great question. There is a cannabis use disorder in the DSM, criteria that, so it is a recognized disorder that you could potentially have a addiction behavior pattern to it. But there's a lot of argument within the community that there really isn't like an addiction pattern around it, that there's, it feels good and people like to do things again that felt good the first and second time. So in that way, it creates an addictive pattern, but it doesn't necessarily promote addiction in that. And it doesn't necessarily result in people breaking into people's houses and armed robberies and things so that they can access their cannabis. Yeah. It's a different addiction than heroin or opiate addiction too.
Gotcha. Okay, so we talked about using cannabis or CBD when it comes to everyday lifestyle, incorporating it in your regimen with your vitamins and other nutritional, things you need. We spoke about opioids. What about the use of CBD with alcohol or beer?
CBD with alcohol or beer is probably fine. You're not going to necessarily run into any trouble. There's no CB receptors in the base of the brain, in the areas of the brain, the very primitive parts that manage breathing and heart rate. So you're not going to experience any problems where you're depressing the heart or lungs by using CBD. So you could overuse alcohol to the point that you shut down those areas of the brain, or opiates for that matter. But there's never been a documented death due to CBD or cannabis. A pretty good safety profile for a product that's been around for 4,000 years in medical literature, all the way back to ancient Egypt and ancient Asian stuff. So it's a good product to try for safety reasons. A lot of mixing, is probably not a good idea until you know how things work individually for you. But at the same time, if your body has an endocannabinoid system that's designed to be stimulated with cannabinoids that your body either produces naturally, the body's natural CBD, the anandamide, or there's, the ability to add additional plant cannabinoids, like through CBD. I don't think it's going to harm a person one bit to drink a little bit and use some CBD or cannabis.
Gotcha.
And
okay.
I think in a lot of cases too, when you're dealing with alcoholism or addiction, there's some nice research coming in on helping to manage addiction and incorporating CBD into addiction treatment. So that's some interesting data that's coming up. And I think that if you're managing an alcoholic that really likes to drink a lot, you may be able to back off on the drinking and provide them some healing and some support by introducing CBD or especially cannabis.
Indeed. Okay. One of the last questions is about intake. So taking, of course you have the flower where you can smoke it or vape. You have the edibles that you ingest. I've been doing some research where orally, being absorbed into the skin through the mouth is a lot faster in how it speeds up and acts in the body. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions in how people should, intake?
Oh, I think the slowest way would be to swallow it. You're 60 to 90 minutes out from a full effect when you swallow the product. So it's more helpful, definitely, to hold it in your mouth and allow it to pass through, under the tongue or on the cheek are the most the best places for absorption in the mouth. I still think inhalation is the best choice. I mean, I'm not a big fan of vapes because of all the issues we've had with vaping. And so you need to be, as a consumer, we need to be so careful with getting the right product in with vaping. And we just, it's hard to find the right product, hard to get the right data from the vaping company. So it's something I almost have to do vape by vape when I'm working with people. But you still have great, low inflammatory circumstances when you're inhaling cannabis. And so it's perfectly reasonable to still, I mean, it's different, right, than smoking 20 cigarettes a day, smoking a pack a day and getting, somewhere between 300 and 400 inhalations of an inflammatory smoke, as opposed to getting 2 or 3 inhalations of a pretty healthy smoke with CBD or cannabinoid formulations. And you get, I think, the most instantaneous result in that case. That's where I think a panic attack person or somebody who's working with like a high out of control level of anxiety would really benefit from having an inhalation product available so that they can get a rapid onset. So there's, of course, marijuana cigarettes, just, having a joint or a pipe or a personal vaporizer like the packs. But there's also companies that are doing single source CBD that when you're using it in these single source cigarettes, they have just a very different onset of action and a very different feel than using a tincture. So I'm actually going to introduce a batch of single source pre-rolled CBD products to my CBD coaches tomorrow and get them affiliated up with that company so that they can offer that to their community, because it's just such a great resource, that particular product for a community of coaches to have. So many people are dealing with anxiety or pain or insomnia that is chronic, but also has little pops where it gets worse. So having all the resources you need to take really great care of your clients, is going to have to include some type of smokable product.
Indeed. I like that. I do. Yeah. So when we talk about, the consumption of it, I know the biggest concern is impurities. What are some things people should be looking out for, when they're going to pick a product to use?
Oh, well, I mean, I think you just really need to trust the person that you're buying the product from. I mean, there's so many different issues with finding great product. It has to be grown properly. In my mind, the farmers and the workers, all the way down to the cashier that you buy it from, need to be treated like human beings and given all of the benefits that work should provide. And then, of course, it should be grown organically, and you should be able to check it for impurities, and not only for cannabinoid concentrations like THC and CBD, but also for heavy metals, because the hemp plant concentrates heavy metals. So it's important to test for those impurities and make sure that that you're keeping an eye out for that. Some of my favorite companies, a lot of my favorite companies will just have a QR code, like right on the bottom of the container. And then you can just scan that QR code in your phone and make sure that, the product that you have is the right product. I mean, geez, like everybody's doing that nowadays, Mm-hmm. So you can, and if they're not doing that and they're not being completely transparent about their testing, then, it just makes me worried that they're not testing each batch, or that they're trying to, not be as straightforward. I mean, I would love these kinds of, codes to be available on my carrots. I mean, I would like to know where all of my food is coming from and be able to really hone in on how things are done for me. But within this industry, we have this very high standard set, and a lot of people are meeting it. So I feel like it's a great idea to look for products like that. I also like a product that has a really high concentration of CBD or of cannabinoids in small amounts, because whenever you're using these, tinctures, it's an oil. I mean, it's still a processed oil, and from a nutrition standpoint, a processed oil is never good for you. There's some that are better and some that are worse, but processed oil is, something that would be good to avoid. It'd be better to get your fats from nuts and, avocados and whole food sources. So whenever you're using a tincture, it's a good idea to have, at least 1,000 milligrams, preferably 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 milligrams in one of these little containers, because that way you can use a half of a dropper full and you're going to get a reasonable amount of CBD so you can see how it's working for you.
Got you. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot, you sharing that information with us. Can you tell us, if you get ready to wrap up, can you tell us some of the work that you're doing and how we can support you?
Oh, well, I'd love to tell you that. I've been shooting and putting up video at cbdandcannabisinfo.com. And I'm now building my coaching community. So we're going to have a really beautiful, vibrant coaching community that'll be able to help people all over the country make their CBD and cannabis selections. So anybody who wants to be a coach, you can reach out to me through cbdandcannabisinfo.com. I have 9 hours of provider certification that will help you know everything that we know right now on different diseases and how they can be managed with CBD and cannabis. And then that also will get you involved with the National Association of Cannabis Businesses, my favorite business organization, and give you a lot of resources through there. And then we're doing some affiliations with apps and tracking sites so that we can get a steady stream of clients headed toward the coaches. So really looking forward to supporting people in your community who want that side hustle, who want to have a gig, because it's a huge market. It's a $7 billion market right now, CBD and cannabis. But if we actually harnessed the entire market, we'd have a $53 billion industry. So everybody is so hot to dig out of their current issues with unemployment, and, all of the states are broke. And the states that accept a recreational cannabis legalization earliest are going to be the ones that are going to dig out the fastest, So, and people are going to get into it, and they're going to need somebody to talk to on how to use these products, and that can be you. It's a great program to get involved in and to help people, get into the right products and stick with it. You can make a big difference.
Indeed. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing and dropping all of these jewels and some knowledge on us. Is there any words of encouragement that you want to share before we sign off?
Gosh, I hope that everybody, uses a CBD or cannabis product most days while we're going through this trauma together, because everybody is suffering a lot right now. And you don't have to spend even just a few minutes on social media or watching the news before you just see how ratcheted up everybody is. So for the anxiety and the stress that you're currently dealing with and that you might need help with, using a cannabinoid formulation will keep your ECS in a really nice, balanced, stabilized situation, and help you to manage and incorporate this trauma in the safest possible way. And so I'd like to see everybody putting in even a small amount every day, just to make sure that you're safe and healthy, and that 20 years from now, your brain can look back on this time with mostly good feelings rather than really scared and anxious feelings.
Indeed. All right. Well, look, I appreciate everyone that had joined in with us today. I hope y'all have had an amazing experience like I have and learned a few things. And I just want to tell everyone out there to stay safe, stay focused, and stay engaged.
You've been listening to Guards Down with Greg Washington. PTSD and complicated grief are very real. About 8 out of every 100 people will have PTSD at some point in their lives. About 20 to 54% of people with complicated grief will simultaneously suffer from major depressive disorder. And that's why shows like this are hugely important. Raising awareness for PTSD and complicated grief. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hook up with us at guardsdown.com, weareiron.org, on Facebook at Guards Down, and find us on YouTube and Instagram.